Let's just jump right into this explainer. Right now, literally all around you, there's this invisible, highly structured conversation happening in the airwaves. Every single time you send an email, stream a video, or just check a notification, your devices are locked in this rapid-fire, heavily regulated dialogue. So today, we're going to decode the invisible traffic laws that govern our digital lives.
But before we get into the heavy technical layers, we kind of have to ask ourselves a really fundamental question. Think about a packed coffee shop. How do all our phones, tablets, and laptops politely share the exact same airspace without just screaming over one another and creating total, absolute data chaos?
Well, to solve this mystery, we'll map out the geography of wireless networks, learn the social etiquette our devices strictly follow, and finally, look at how they meticulously package their messages to hit the right target.
So starting off with Section 1, what exactly is IEEE 802.11, the standard for wireless LANs? Moving right along to Section 2, the architecture of Wi-Fi, from single rooms to sprawling campuses. Okay, to understand all of this, we really have to start at the foundation. IEEE 2.11 is the formal spec for wireless local area networks, what you and I just call Wi-Fi. Let's look at the city planning of a Wi-Fi network. There are basically two distinct ways to build our basic neighborhoods, or basic service sets. First, you have the Ad-Hoc BSS. This is a standalone network without an access point, where devices just find each other and agree to communicate directly. It's totally decentralized. Then, on the other side, we have an infrastructure BSS. This is what you almost certainly have at home, a setup moderated by a central access point that acts like a traffic cop to coordinate everything. Now here's how we scale up from a small town to a huge metropolis. When you have a sprawling corporate campus or a big university, a single BSS just isn't going to cut it. Multiple BSS neighborhoods connect via a wired or wireless distribution system. This overarching structure is known as an Extended Service Set, or ESS. It allows mobile stations to exist inside a BSS, while the access points themselves act as stationary nodes, keeping the whole shebang connected.
And as users move through these interconnected towns, their movement is categorized by three types of mobility. You've got node transition, which is exactly what it sounds like, you're stationary, or just moving within a single BSS. Then there's BSS transition, where you walk from one access point to another within the same ESS. Think of that like walking from your kitchen out to the garage. Finally, ESS transition means you're moving entirely from one network to a completely different one. But here's an absolutely critical fact to keep in mind. IEEE 802.11 actually does not guarantee that your communication will be continuous and uninterrupted during these moves.
All right, Section 3, the rules of conversation, the MAC sublayers.
So, how do all these devices talk without constantly talking over each other? Well, this is handled by the MAC, or Media Access Control Sublayer, and there are two main conversational styles here. On one side, we have the Distributed Coordination Function, or DCF. This uses a method called CSMA/CA, which is essentially a protocol where devices have to politely raise their hands and listen to check if the airwaves are clear before they start speaking. On the flip side is the Point Coordination Function, or PCF. This is an optional method used mainly in infrastructure networks for super time-sensitive data. In PCF, the access point acts as a strict moderator, pointing to and pulling each device one by one, creating a totally contention-free environment.
Now, this polite hand-raising builds into the standard DCF handshake, which happens to be the most common way our devices communicate. Think of it like a highly formalized conversation. Step 1, the device checks if the room is quiet. It literally senses the medium. Step 2, it sends an RTS, a request to send. It's basically asking for the floor. Step 3, the destination replies with a CTS, clear to send, permission granted. And finally, Step 4, the data is actually sent, followed by an AK, an acknowledgement. That AK is essentially the applause at the end, confirming the message was actually heard. And that's vital, because wireless senders can't detect collisions on their own.
Which brings us to Section 4, avoiding collisions and navigating blind spots.
Because look, even with all these polite rules, blind spots definitely still exist. And this leads to what networking engineers call the hidden station drama. Imagine Station B and Station C. They both really want to talk to Station A, which is right in the middle. But there's a physical barrier between B and C. They're completely hidden from each other. If B checks to see if the channel is idle, it won't hear C, and it might just start transmitting right over C's conversation with A. The result? Total data collision. To fix this frustrating hidden station problem, the protocol uses something incredibly clever called a network allocation vector, or NAV.
When Station B sends that initial request to send to Station A replies with a clear to send that broadcasts the exact duration of the upcoming transmission. Now, even though C couldn't hear B, it definitely hears A's response. Station C then sets its internal NATIMR. Think of it as an invisible do not disturb clock. It knows exactly how long to stay quiet and refrain from transmitting until the conversation between B and A is completely wrapped up.
Let's wrap up with Section 5, Packaging and Addressing Data, the logistics of Wi-Fi. Now that our devices are communicating politely, how do they actually package their data? Well, a standard Wi-Fi frame has room for 4 distinct addresses, and their specific meanings dynamically shift based on just 2 simple 1-bit flags, to DS and from DS. For example, if both are set to 0, the data is just moving directly between 2 stations in an ad hoc network. It's not touching the distribution system at all. But if 2DS is 1 and from DS is 1, that data is making a much more complex journey from one access point to another within a wireless distribution system. It's an incredibly efficient way to dynamically route traffic.
And efficiency is absolutely key here, especially when we're dealing with data sizes. Consider the number 1034. If you have a data frame of 1034 bytes, sending that entire massive chunk all at once in a noisy wireless environment is pretty risky. The longer the frame, the higher the probability that some random interference will corrupt a bit, completely ruining the whole package.
So, the 802.11 protocol solves this risk through fragmentation. Rather than sending a massive 34-byte payload, the station mathematically chops it up. Subtracting the 34 bytes of overhead leaves 1,000 bytes of raw data, which is then cleanly fragmented into 4 250-byte payloads. Why go through the trouble? Because if a sudden burst of static corrupts the transmission, resending a tiny 250-byte frame is significantly faster and wastes way less bandwidth than having to resend the entire original massive frame. It's all about mitigating risk in a totally unpredictable physical environment.
This whole explainer really highlights a miraculous invisible choreography that's happening around us every single second. From the way our digital neighborhoods are zoned, to the precise handshakes required to speak, to the meticulous fragmentation of data, 802.11 is literally a masterpiece of digital diplomacy. But it does leave us with a pretty critical question to ponder. As our physical world becomes absolutely saturated with smart devices, from our fridges to our cars, what new invisible traffic laws will we need to invent to keep our increasingly crowded digital airwaves from descending into total chaos? Thanks for exploring this with us. Keep questioning the invisible structures around you.